Radyo-katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.
Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atin mista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng pera. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, katipunero sugo, todo sa kayod, tulong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, galing hiding at tigil. Blue and white, one big fight. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan.
Let us understand mental health and explore how we can take care of our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. Welcome to your weekly slice of mental health tips and tidbits with Pat and B, here on Mind Ed.
Sa'yo sumisilong kapag ang puso ko'y pagod.
Radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM. This is your stop for all things pop. Catch our all-around pop culture geek, Chola Sediaren, as he throws in some dose of what's poppin' and what's hot in the pop culture scene here on Popcorn. Munch in with us every Thursdays from 4 to 6, only here on Radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM.
Nasistress ka na ba? Nagpapanik o natatakot dahil sa COVID-19? Normal lang ang ganitong mga reaksyon sa ngayon. Pero may magagawa ka para mapagtagumpayan ang sitwasyon na ito. Ituloy lang ang pangangamusta sa mga kamag-anak at kaibigan gamit ang text, tawag o video. Tiyakin na ang mga bata ay ligtas at nasa maayos na kalagayan. Gawin sa bahay ang mga nakasanayan upang hindi mabagot o mabalisa sa panahong ito. Sa wastong pag-iingat, ang virus hindi kakalat. COVID-19, kayang-kaya nating tapusin.
Radyo-katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle. Tara na't simulan ang inyong umaga sa mga magagandang refleksyon tungkol sa ating buhay at pananampalataya. Kasama sina Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, Father J. Boy Gonzales at Father Nono Alfonso ng Kapisanan ni Jesus, Father Cali Llamado ng Manila Cathedral at Binibining Risa Singson Kaupeng ng Light of Jesus Community dito sa Kapit Pandasal sa Radyo-katipunan 87.9 FM.
Palusot ka pa. Magandang araw po sa inyo. Kape at pandasal na po tayo. Ito po si Cardinal Chito Tagle. Lahat siguro ng tao nakaranas na magpalusot kapag naiipit na. Kapag mukhang mabubuko ang isang maling ginawa, hahanap ng daan para makalusot. At kapag pinaniwalaan ang ating palusot, lumuluwag ang paghinga. Pero nakakapagod at nakakatakot din ang magpalusot. Sa harapan ni Jesus, huwag na tayong magpalusot. kilala naman niya tayo. Wala tayong maitatago sa Kanya. Bukod dito, kaya niyang unawain ang kahinaan ng tao. Hindi niya hangad na sirain ang nagkamali, kundi iligtas sila. Kay Jesus, sapat nang aminin ang pagkakamali natin at ihahatid niya tayo sa tuwid na daan. O Diyos, batid mo ang lahat. Patuloy mo kaming gabayan. Amen.
Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. The voice of the eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atin sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng eskwela. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, katipunero sugo. Todo sa kayod, tunong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, galing giting at tigil.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour.
Good morning mga Katipuneros. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to our show here at Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM, the Ateneo Campus Radio. This is the Jesuit Hour and I'm your host, Father Nono, Alfonso, S.A. Yes, magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat and welcome to our show. Kanina, no, kung napanood niyo po si Cardinal Chito Tagle, may pinapatamaan na naman yata sa kanyang panalangin. Oo. Wag raw magpalusot. Okay, uso ngayon ang palusot. Sana po hindi tayo magpalusot. We open our show, of course, with our prayer. And since this morning we're going to talk about grief, because it's the month of November, it's the month of the dead. The whole church for this whole month of November is grieving, is praying for our dead. And of course, we want to talk about grief because of the pandemic. Kahit bumubuti na po ang kalagayan, of course, many of us are still grieving over the loss of our dearly departed, people we lost during this pandemic. And of course, ngayon ko lang natutunan po, while preparing for this show, we grieve over many other things. So we'll talk about that, but we open our show with our prayer on grieving. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. O loving and compassionate God, you understand our grief because you witnessed your own Son, Jesus, suffering on the cross for the sins of mankind. You are a Father who lost a Son to save a dying world. You are the Father of compassion. You are the God of all comfort. As we grieve our many losses, we know you grieve with us. Our tears are precious to you. You grieve much more than we do. Comfort those who have lost loved ones from COVID-19 and other diseases, from extrajudicial killings, from criminal acts, from natural disasters. Make them feel they are not alone in this time of sorrow. Grant them a profound sense of your presence. Give them a community that will weep with them and walk with them. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So that's actually a prayer I borrowed from a book which involves our guest for this morning po. The book is titled "This Season of Grief," and I lifted that prayer from this book. Let me now introduce our guest. Siyempre po, kilalang kilala itong ating guest. She's a celebrity. Yan naman. But proudly, Atenean. Blue-blooded. Yan po, no? So, she's from the Ateneo, graduating from a degree in business management. And then she took a master's degree, finished a master's degree in family psychology and education at Miriam. And of course, patuloy na nag-aaral in 2004, I think, or 2005. She went to Harvard to she enrolled in a course in journalism there as well. So she's a writer, columnist at the Philippine Daily Inquirer. Yun po, binabasa natin siya doon. She's a communications specialist. Ang dami niya pong ang dami niya pong mga kumpanyang tinulungan to help in their communications, especially in medicine. Mga pharmaceutical companies, for example, how to educate people about vaccination. Maganda sanang pag-usapan. Tanungin siya how the government is doing in its communication about the pandemic, but that will be another topic. And of course, for today, we invited her because she is a grief educator and coach. Alamin po natin kung anong ibig sabihin niya, and why would anyone specialize on this? Grief. So, my dear friends, please welcome to the show for the first time, Miss Cathy Babao. Good morning, Cathy.
Hi, Father Nono. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to the Jesuit Hour here at radyo-katipunan. Maraming salamat.
Yes, it's our pleasure, and of course, this is your alma mater naman.
Yes.
And kate-text lang po actually ng batchmate mo. Guess who? Your class valedictorian. Sabi
Oh,
niya,
Father Carol. I was just thinking about them actually before the intro. So, Father Carol and Father Weems are my batchmates. I know we have other Jesuit batchmates. I think we have 4 Jesuits in our batch. I believe.
yes. I think another one is Father Arnie Bugtas, 1986.
Yes,
as
yes,
well.
that's right. Yeah, Father Arnie.
Yes.
Yes.
Oo. Actually, marami yata sila eh. Anyway, so Miss Cathy, how have you been, especially since the start of the pandemic?
Well, the pandemic has been a really busy time for me, because of all the deaths, all the losses that have been happening. I think no one in this has been untouched by death. We all know of someone, or at the very least, friends of friends who have lost family members or other friends. Ako personally, I've lost several good friends because of the pandemic. Ano na tayo? Almost, what are we now? 18, 19 months into it? Ganun ba?
Yes. Opo. And 45,000 dead already. 45,000 plus.
Imagine that, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
But how about work? So work from home po kayo?
Yes, work from home. So I see all my clients via Zoom. Kasi nga, wala, di ba? Pre-pandemic, I would see them face-to-face. But since the pandemic started, I think I resumed. There was a time din nung bagong-bago pa. Syempre, di ba? Lahat tayo, there was fear, there was anxiety. So I only resumed around May, I believe, early May. Yeah, I took March and all of April off when it was really at the very start. And I've been very busy since then.
When you say client, you would mean parang yung for your counseling? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly people, the bulk is still people who have lost loved ones to
Wow.
death. But grief kasi, any experience of loss, Father Nono, can result in an experience of grief, right? It's not always death. It can be, like in the pandemic, there's a lot of different losses, loss of routine, loss of,
Yeah.
our usual support systems, maraming loss of relationships. There's also been a lot of anxiety over all the uncertainty that we face, no? And we still continue to face. So I also have a group, parang there's a group of clients also na ganon. Yung anxiety over work, over, when they had to like return to their family homes and work from home, and they're no longer used to being in that situation. So all sorts of grief, all sorts of loss has resulted. Has
I
come out of
actually,
this period.
I asked you that question because dun po sa binasa kong resume,
Yes.
uh, actually hindi ko na binanggit na you were part of companies, pharmaceutical companies. You were their communications specialist. Oo.
Yes. Mhm.
And yet you have a degree in business management. So,
Yes.
ang dami niyong interest. Grabe, no?
Yeah. Alam mo naman, during our time when this was back in I'm dating myself, right? This was back in the mid-80s. When you go to college at that time, you follow what your parents want. So, ang gusto ko talaga noon, communications. Pero sabi ng mami ko, hindi, mag-business ka. So, I took a business management degree. So I don't regret it because it's been helpful naman in the work that I found much later on.
Okay. But now you have focused on this,
Yes.
parang vocation within a vocation, ano?
Yeah, parang ganyan. Well, as you know, my interest from grief grew out of my own personal experience. You asked earlier in the program na why would anybody want to do this, right?
Yes,
Why would
yes.
anybody want to specialize in it? Well, it was born out of my own personal losses, no? Even from childhood, when I was 16, I lost my dad very suddenly to a heart attack. He was very young. He was only 49 years old. And then fast forward many years later, in 1998, I lost my son, from complications that arose out of his open heart surgery. So those two life-changing experiences sort of set me on the path to grief coaching and grief education.
What does that mean, to become a grief educator and coach?
Well,
What's like a day for you?
It varies. Like, I don't really see clients every day. I only see them 3 times a week because it kind of takes mabibigat yung kaso. So
Yeah.
I like to give myself space in between the days so that when I'm with my clients, I'm with them like 100%. What's it like? It's heavy, but it's very rewarding. For me, to be able to bring back the hope, to be able to bring back the smiles on their faces, to make them see the possibility of a future. That's immeasurable.
But you had to deal with your own experience, right?
Yes.
Your
yes.
loss of your father and your son.
That's right. Yeah, before I, could go fully into this work. But, the wounded healer concept,
Yes.
right? So I believe that, I'm a wounded healer. I know what it's like to have lost a parent. I know what it's like to have lost a child. I've also had other personal losses not related to death. So it has helped me so much in relating with my clients.
I was going through the book. I got a copy from Father Mario Francisco.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So anyway, and I learned a lot, like for example, when we talk about grief, that's why I want you to define now what it is. Kasi when we talk about grief, ang palaging iniisip lang ng tao is death, di ba? When you mourn over somebody who
Right.
died. Pero dito ang dami ko natutunan na it's not just
No.
the death of a person.
That's
You
right.
grieve over an unfulfilled future, for example. Diba? So,
Right.
marami ngayong pandemic, ganun yung naramdaman. So,
Right.
can you define for us what grief is?
Grief is basically the full set of emotions that you experience when you go through a loss. So ano-ano yung mga emotions na yon? There's anger, there's fear, there's sadness, there's loneliness, there's anxiety. So all these things make up the grief experience. All these emotions put together make up the grief experience.
Wow. And in the book, for example, parang catalog siya ng iba't ibang klaseng grief.
Loss.
I was thinking na I would just read about death nga during this pandemic,
Right.
but it opened
Oh,
me up to other other issues
that's right. Yeah.
like
Losing a home, di ba? There was a couple
yeah.
there in the book na they lost their home, so they had to move to another, and then another story there, they lost their business. So, iba-ibang klaseng losses, all of them resulting in a grief experience.
Mhm. So it's an emotion, di ba?
Yeah, it's a group of, a group of all the emotions that you feel when you go through an experience of loss. So, nandyan yung takot, nandyan yung lungkot, nandyan yung pag-agam-agam, lahat-lahat na.
So what do you say to a client, for example? The first thing that you say,
When they come to me, first of all, I ask them, so what brings you to me today? What's your story? So I like to hear stories. I like to make them, I like to listen to their stories. So I make them tell their stories. And sometimes they don't know where to begin, diba? Because sometimes it's just too much. So then I help guide them. Okay, do you want to start here? Do you want to start here? Or you want to begin now where you are right now, right? And then so we travel back. So it's basically companioning them so that they can, it's in the telling of your story that helps you make sense of what it is that you're going through.
mhm. Wow. Paano yan Miss Cathy, yung process when you guide them, gaano katagal yan usually? Or is it iba-iba sa mga tao?
Iba-iba. I can't say like categorically 4 sessions lang tayo or 5 sessions lang tayo. I have clients that stay with me until they hit the first year of their of their loss. I have some naman who are okay na, parang meron na silang clarity after a few sessions. So it really varies. But if you were to ask me what the average is, I would say 4 to 6
Years?
sessions. Usually,
Sessions.
no, sessions, yeah.
Sessions, yeah.
So they stay with me, and then sometimes they just come back the following year. They'll see me once, just to like check in and see how they are.
So unique, everyone experiences grief
Yes.
uniquely. Meron bang mga pupunta sa'yo na parang yun nga, I just feel depressed? Kasi maraming ganito sa pandemic, di ba?
Yeah.
That's why I think they invented the term languishing. Di ba?
Languishing, yes.
Languishing.
Yeah,
Na
languishing.
uso. Yes. So meron bang lumalapit sa'yo na I just feel depressed, down, I don't know what it is. Can you help me sort things out?
Yes, yeah, merong mga ganon. Or like, they're working and they can't like focus and they just feel so heavy. It's so hard for them to sleep at night and all that. And sometimes a lot of this is because nga of all the changes and also because of all the energy, right, all around us na for a while mabigat talaga, di ba? It's only now that, it's like sort of starting to lift, that our numbers have gone down, that there's now like a semblance of returning to, but I don't like to use the term normal because we're not really ever going to return to what our life was before. This is really all going to be new to all of us.
Can you share with us some stories during this pandemic? People who, of course, without revealing their identities,
Yes.
just their stories, di ba? Na,
Yes.
ano yung mga, what did people grapple with during this pandemic?
Well, sometimes it's interesting how certain situations become a trigger for certain unresolved issues in one's youth or in one's childhood. So I've had several of those na parang silang suddenly nag-anxiety attack, and all that when they were fine. Like, for many years they were productive, and then suddenly you're thrown into the situation and you have all these feelings that, you didn't used to feel. And so when you go into their stories, you find that there was something in their childhood or in their youth na something traumatic, madalas, that di naman nila na-proseso noong araw. So ngayon, all the feeling of uncertainty, it acts as a trigger to bring up all these, and so your body reacts to it. So, yon. So sometimes, if there's a need, I work with a few psychiatrists. If I see that there's a need for more assessment and a need for medication, whether it's short term or long term, then I work with the psychiatrist and I work together.
What about sa amin po mga pare, ngayong pandemic, the hardest was they'd call us, a loved one is sick in the hospital, nasa ICU na. And then
Yes.
of course after a while,
Mm.
they die, 'di
Yeah.
ba? And yet bawal sa aming pumunta sa ospital kahit sila, yung mga family members,
Right, right.
And this
Yeah.
was the hardest thing for many people.
Yeah.
May mga pumunta po sa inyo para magpa-counsel about that?
Yeah, ang mahirap din talaga with this pandemic is it changed the whole way of, di ba, usually pag may sakit, as, we're there until like the last moment, or we're at least there and able to say goodbye. But pandemic, wala. You say goodbye to a
Yeah.
screen, right? I mean, buti kung, at saka minsan ang dami yung bigla. Yung okay, tas bakit nung hapon biglang namatay, di ba? I mean, you weren't
Yeah, oo.
really
oo.
expecting it, or the next day biglang nag-turn for the worse. So there's so many stories like that. And what's worse is sometimes in a family, not just one. There are families that have lost 2 members, 3 members, and even me as a professional, that's like, it's kind of, wow, that's really hard to grapple with, diba? So sometimes I ask myself, wow, what do you say? I mean, iba eh. It's really it was really a different
So
very
what do
difficult
you
to-
what do you tell them? Sabi namin, kami usually pag pare, 'di ba?
Yeah.
Sabi namin, ipagdadasal po namin
Yes.
kayo, yung gano'n, mahirap po talaga. But
Right.
other than that, wala na kaming masabi eh.
Yeah.
And some of them of course grapple with yung bakit kasi ganito yung nangyari. They blame the government, they blame the hospital, 'di ba, etc. But as an experienced counselor, what do you tell them?
Which is also expected, Father, yung blame, diba? That's part of the grief experience. You really, our natural instinct is to find something or someone or the system to blame. Sometimes we even blame ourselves. But blame is really, and I always emphasize it, blame is really unproductive. Kahit anong i-blame mo tao or you blame yourself, your loved one's not gonna come back. It's really a useless exercise. It's useless energy to blame. But sometimes you just have to allow them to say it, to speak it, so that they can get it out of their system. Because that's important is, to be able to find a way for the pain to get out of
Okay.
your body. Because when it gets stuck, then that's when, you feel all these ailments, or that's when depression can set in, or
Parang-
anxiety can set in. Yun.
Parang catharsis, let them just
Yeah.
put it out there.
Yes, they need to put it out there.
Yeah. Meron akong dalawang families calling me and I cite these families because I think they're feeling guilty. Of course, they're not telling me
Yeah.
because they refuse to have to be vaccinated.
Okay.
And then so yung isa halimbawa medyo elderly couple,
Yeah.
pero they have this conspiracy mindset, yung mga ganon. So they were taking ivermectin but
Okay.
not
No vaccine.
no vaccines.
Oo.
So anyway, namatay yung asawa niya.
Oh my gosh.
Namatay yung asawa niya, and they're a lovely couple. They really love each other.
Yeah.
And hindi niya madalaw sa ospital. And then nung namatay, of course, because may COVID, na-cremate na lang, and then diretso na sa siya, elderly siya, so he is vulnerable. Talagang nangyari lahat ito na wala siya.
Oo
And
nga.
so he called me up saying, Father, can I make a confession? Sabi ko, bawal sa telepono, diba?
Oo.
So you can just confess directly to God for now,
Right,
sabi ni Pope
right.
Francis. So, but I can listen to you.
Yes.
Sabi if you want to ventilate, sabi ko, I can listen to it. And he was just crying. Of course, alam mo naman, mga lalaki medyo proud. Short of, di ba, blaming himself, parang just really lamenting that he was not there for her.
That's the hardest part, really. Yeah, especially if it's the wife, no?
Yes, who
May
passed
rape,
away.
right? Yeah, who passed away. Yeah, it's hard because the man is usually always the protector. I'm supposed to take care of all of you, and suddenly it's like you have no control over what
Mhm.
happened. Plus, yun na nga, yung guilt na, kasi hindi kami nagpabakuna, di ba? I mean, I'm sure that's could be at the back of his head. Yeah, so,
Merong isa, yung the other family na tumawag rin sa akin, he lost his son.
oh,
Ganun din, same story nga. Ayaw rin nilang magpabakuna,
magpabakuna.
'di ba? But they avail of yung ewan ko nga kung bakit ayaw magpabakuna, but they would avail of ivermectin, blah blah blah. 'Di ba yung ganun? So
Yes.
again, the son who was rather medyo malaking tao,
Big, yeah.
so vulnerable, he succumbed to COVID. So again, this guy was blaming the
Yeah.
hospital. Kasi sabi raw,
Oh,
was blaming the hospital kasi nga parang hindi naalagaan, hindi naasikaso. He
yeah.
was okay. Yung sinabi mo, he was okay nung pinasok nila, medyo okay naman.
Oo.
Tapos biglang
Took
he
a
turned
turn for the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, took a turn for the worst. So,
Mhm.
because I mean, we all know that the people getting hit now or getting the brunt of it are really the people who are unvaccinated.
Mm.
You know, that's a truth, not just here, but even in the United States.
Mhm.
Most of their ICUs are really filled with unvaccinated and
Yeah.
mostly male, mostly overweight, or mostly with
Oo.
comorbidities.
Pero isa sa sore point was the inability to say goodbye to that
Yes,
uh,
to the
you- to be,
loved
to
one.
be part of the
Mhm.
last dying seconds or minutes of the loved one.
Right.
Why is
Right.
that
Yeah.
why is that important, Miss
Well,
Cathy?
because there's it's very important not for just closure, but to be able to say what you want to say, to be able to, di ba, when you're present, to hold the loved one, to kiss them, in their last moments, to say I love you, to say I'm sorry for whatever. I mean, there are four things nga they say that are very important at the end of life. One is to say I love you, the second is to say I'm sorry, and then the third is to say I forgive you for whatever, and then please forgive me for whatever it is that I might have done to you. Eh nawala lahat yun, di ba?
Mhm.
That's all gone, because usually when you're on the phone, wala na. It's like
Oo, yeah.
really the last few minutes. So ang hirap. So we have to be creative. You have to find ways and means to, be able to say goodbye even afterwards. So that's why I'm a advocate for journaling. Journaling your feelings, writing to the loved one. These are things that you can do even after the fact.
Mhm. Sa mga pare merong anointing of the sick, and then may yung funeral service, but all of that nawala, no?
Wala.
Gaano kahalaga rin yung ritual na mga ganyan, religious rituals?
Yeah.
They're
Rituals?
they're a way of saying goodbye, di ba?
Yes.
How important are they?
And because we're still a predominantly Catholic nation, rituals are very important, especially kung very religious yung family, di ba? Ay, hindi siya nabigyan ng ganito, or hindi siya nabigyan ng blessing and all that. So they'll feel na baka kulang, or things like that. And yeah, but you can still do rituals even
Yeah,
after. Kaya nga mabuti we have technology, because then we have the masses, we can have virtual get-togethers. Of course, it's not the same, right? But it's a good replacement. It's a good thing that we have that. So it's really. Mhm. Go ahead.
I remember, I don't know if you remember isang English teacher sa Ateneo a long time ago.
Yes.
She was American, she was foreigner.
Dr. Evangelista?
Yes.
Susan, yes. Dr.
Yes,
Susan.
and she
Yes.
asked us to read an article. I don't know if basta isang raw. The article was written by a foreigner,
Okay.
and I think she married a Filipino,
Mm-mm.
and then may nangyari sa family, may namatay, and
Mhm.
before this experience of death, she could not understand why we Filipinos have yung mahabang lamay,
Mm-hmm.
and then from an outsider's point of view, parang sabi niya, napaka naman sadomasochistic ng mga Pinoy kasi for 9 days
Yeah.
may pupunta dun sa babae tapos tatanungin, kumusta ka na?
Yes.
Then when the writer finally went through it herself, naintindihan niya na it was cathartic. It was
Yes.
it was healing na palaging kinikwento mo yung
Right.
ganito yung nangyari sa kanya, inatake sa
Yeah.
puso, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah,
it can be cathartic, but it can also be, on the other hand, tiring to
oo
keep
nga.
repeating, di ba, the story. So there's a middle ground somewhere, because a lot of my clients also tell me that, they'll say, I know our friends have good intent, but it's like they don't have to call me every 2 or 3 days to ask how I am, kasi nothing changes, right, in 2 or 3 days, and it's just so tiring to have to, like, I'm still fine, I'm still the same, nothing has changed. So
But what's the middle ground? Kasi dito sa libro, merong
yeah.
si Philip, sabi niya, why telling your stories matters.
Mhm.
Diba? What's the
Right.
middle ground between, diba, you want to grieve silently,
Yeah.
and yet for the healing process to start, you also have to come to terms with the loss by telling
Right.
stories.
Yes. Well, each person mourns differently, diba? So if grief is all the emotions, which I always like to describe as the water inside the bottle, diba? But the bottle, the container is grief. Mourning is when you pour the water out of the bottle. So you really need to find ways and means of mourning your loss, whether that be talking to someone, whether that be writing down your thoughts and your feelings, whether that means, going for long walks in the morning, or drawing or painting or cooking. You need to find what will help you take the grief out of your body. So iba-iba. There are people who like to talk and kwento and kwento and kwento, but there are some who are like, okay, I'll just talk to one person or two persons this week. That's it, diba? Ayoko na makipag-usap sa iba. I would just rather read my Bible or listen to whatever, and I'm fine.
So, okay lang. Depende sa'yo, no? Paiba-iba.
Depende. So as a friend, you also have to makikiramdam ka din, di ba? Ano ba ang kailangan niya? What does this person need? Or you can offer, hey, is there an errand that I can run for you? Or is there something that you need to buy? Can I buy it for you? Or you can send care packages, send food, send flowers. Kung ano yung kahiligan niya, di ba? I hope whatever this is brings a smile to your day. I just want you to know that I'm here. So, call me anytime. Ganyan. Yun. Things
So,
like that.
So we are saying na depende rin sa personality type yung
Yes.
grieving process.
Yes. It's also dependent on if that person is an introvert or an extrovert. Or sometimes extroverts suddenly become introverts, right? So, ano lang, just be there, just listen, just find out, no? Don't be too intrusive. Make your presence felt.
But if you were to kumbaga detail the process, the healing process involved in grieving,
Yes.
like you already mentioned na kailangan ilabas yung mga emotions, diba? Confront your emotions.
Yes.
What else? What would kumbaga, what is necessary for the healing process in grieving?
You don't run away from the pain. Sometimes people say, but I'm crying and crying every day. But that's what's necessary.
Okay.
If you need to cry it out, if you really love a person very much, so that's expected. You're going to grieve a lot, right? You're going to mourn a lot. So don't expect na mauubos ka agad ang luha mo, di ba? So sometimes you just have to remind the person na okay lang yan kung umiiyak ka araw-araw. Lalo na if it's very new. So of course, di ba? It's really going to be very hard. Now, with grief, it should soften over time. Now, what is time? Diba? Time is relative. Is that 6 months? Is that 1 year? I said the marker is that basta you're getting better. You feel that you're getting better little by little. Now, if you feel that after 6 months, after 8 months, you're in a worse situation than you were in month 1 or 2, then baka that merits, processing and looking into. You may be depressed already, right? Kaya nga, I always say, when in doubt, go seek professional help. There's no shame in that. Whether it's a psychologist, a priest, a nun, a counselor, ang importante may kausapin ka. Diba? Don't also just deal with it by yourself.
What if you run away from it or you don't deal with it because, 'di ba, no, I'm busy so parang,
Yes.
so what happens to you?
Or you busy yourself, right? Because you don't
Okay,
want to
correct,
deal with it.
correct.
Yeah. So that's going to catch up with you
Yeah.
eventually. Eventually it will catch up with you. And I've seen that a lot of times. People who just try to stuff it in.
Yeah.
It catches up with them more than a year later, 18 months later. Suddenly, there's like all these pains that, they're experiencing, or biglang nagpa-panic attack, or the body is always wise. If you're not paying attention to what you need to pay attention, then your body will find ways and means to, hey, listen to your pain, right? You need to deal with it. It's all trapped inside your body. So I'm finding a way to get out and get your attention.
Wow, I ask you that question because sa amin sa religious community rin especially the Jesuits,
Right.
we pride ourselves of being busy.
Uh-huh.
I've experienced 3 deaths in the family already.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Two before I was ordained, and my mother just recently in 2017. Pero yung setup sa amin is pagkalibing, bibigyan ka ng panahon na okay, 1 week, but you have to report to work. After
Right,
that,
it's so short, right?
it's too short. And
Too short. Yes.
well, si Father Ben Nebres, because I was so close to my mom, he asked me na, so he understood na, maybe you need time, more time for yourself. Sabi niya, what do you wanna do? Sabi ko, ang gusto ko, Father, magbarko. Sabi niya, and he was very supportive. Of course, hindi natuloy kasi may trabaho na.
Oo.
May naghihintay.
Pero at least, di ba, that you heard it from him, that you got that support, na parang, pwede pala, di ba? That already makes you feel much better. Because like I always say, grief, loss, especially death, is always life-changing. I mean, if you go through a major loss, people have changed careers. People have changed their life mission because they've, gone through a life-changing death. So, madami akong clients na ganyan, they were businessmen, they own their businesses and all that, and then their wives die, and it's like they just pass the business on to the children and go around the world, or go and do farming, or they pursue some other hobby. Ganun. So, nababago ka talaga eh. Loss will really change you.
And you really have to face it and deal with it. Hindi
Yes.
pwede hindi pwede yung sa amin na shortcut or short circuit or
Exactly.
or saka muna next year na lang pag nag-retreat ka, saka muna lang
Oo.
pray over it.
Pa-park mo, di ba? That you mentioned that, very interesting. I won't mention the order, but I worked with nuns, in one of the big major cities. And I was so moved and surprised because these nuns were in their 70s, in their may iba pa nga late 80s and all that. And because siguro nung araw, mas strict pa talaga, their parents would die. Hindi sila makalabas, di ba? So, hindi nila napuntahan, hindi sila nakapaglibing and all that. So, they were mourning for the first time in that, it was a weekend workshop that we did. They mourned their parents' losses for the very first time. And we're talking about losses from 30, 40 years ago.
Wow. But that's typical. Yung mga Jesuit missionaries from the US, here in the Philippines, when their parents died,
Yes.
or a family member died, nandito sila sa Pilipinas. Di ba, barko lang noon?
Yes.
And ang barko noon would take like a month.
Yeah.
So, hindi sila nakakauwi.
Yun.
Most of them, hindi sila nakauwi when their parents died. Diba? So,
malalim yun.
what they did, I know of an American Jesuit.
Yes.
Na yung matanda na siya, nakauwi siya sa US. The first thing he did was to visit the grave of his parents for the first time after 30 years.
See,
Something
that's
like
exactly, that's exactly what So maybe, community needs also to be
Yeah.
more responsive, when it's a loss, to lengthen the, time of mourning. I mean, may mahirap sa atin Filipinos, we have yung Catholics, we have yung babang luksa, di ba? So after 1 year. But it doesn't really end after 1 year, we
Yeah.
all know that, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes nape-pressure yung tao, oh my God, 1 year na, di ba? I should be feeling better, I should be like
Correct.
this, like that. But no, that's just a marker, you're not expected to like bounce back completely after 1 year. Because sometimes after 1 year, dun ka pa nga minsan natitrigger di ba?
Yeah.
So,
There are also unhealthy ways of coping with
Mhm.
grief, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
yung, of course, yung drinking,
Yeah.
etc.
Drugs. Mhm.
How do you tell your clients to avoid these?
Yeah, I tell them you put yourself in deeper problems, if you start drinking or you start using prohibited drugs or just self-medicating, di ba? You sometimes ask, so where did you get your sedative or where did you get your sleep? Are you seeing a psychiatrist? Hindi daw, bigay lang daw nung kamag-anak na doktor and all that. I said, no, that's not the way it should be. You need to like be under supervision of a professional.
Pero kasi 'di ba parang nakakalimot like uh, like uminom ka, 'di ba?
Yes.
So 'di ba nakakalimot ka. Yan yung lagi nilang sinasabi, 'di ba?
Correct. But you're just numbing the pain. It's just temporary, di ba? Pag nawala na yung effect ng alcohol, balik ka na naman, di ba? Maalala mo na naman. And maraming ganyan, ha? That's true. They use alcohol as a crutch. Like, there are a lot of, recovering alcoholics. When you go deep into their stories, you'll know that the alcohol was a crutch for them to numb the pain of something they're not addressing.
Can I ask you, Cathy, dito kasi sa libro, very interesting, yun nga, sabi ko parang catalog yung iba't ibang klaseng loss. Di ba? Yung may tinatawag ng ambiguous loss.
Yes.
Di ba? And so, ambiguous grief. So, how do you deal with them? Like, for example, dito, ang ganda nung kwento about yung sa Yolanda. Di ba?
Yes.
And Yolanda. And that was repeated again. Of course, merong bagyo na naman tayong malakas nit last November, last year. So, yung ambiguous losses, what do you tell them?
Ambiguous losses it's the situation really that is, you feel that you're going crazy, but you're not going crazy. It's the situation that makes you feel that you're going crazy. So you have to realize that hindi ikaw yon, di ba? It's the situation that you are living through that is making it difficult or different for you. Like yung mga nasalanta sa bagyo, di ba? Parang they'll say, ano naman yan, di ba? Parang bahay lang yan or something. But that's still a valid loss, right? I mean, a miscarriage, for example, di ba? Hindi pa naman ano yun, di ba? But that's still a valid loss. You still need to mourn it. So you still need to mourn an ambiguous loss. You have to name it, accept it for what it is.
Yung
mourn it.
Yung sa Yolanda, and we have a Jesuit seminarian whose parents died in that typhoon, sa Ormoc yata or sa
Tacloban.
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 Talagang inanod yung kanyang parents and they never found the bodies.
Oh, wow.
So yun, well, this guy is really very spiritual. So that was a strength. Pero ang dami like as as shared by your book na ang dami yung parang how do you start mourning when you don't even have the body, di ba?
Yes, ambiguous, di ba? I mean, it's also like everyone who had loved ones disappear during martial law, di ba? Or not just during martial law, but even after, di ba? Yung ina-abduct, wala. Tapos hindi mo na alam, buhay ba o hindi, di ba? So how do you do you keep the hope? Do you keep the flame? Do you keep I guess after a period of time, you need to start mourning and remembering the person and celebrating his memory in other ways.
Yeah. So, but you have to decide, na
yes,
in this ambiguity, for your own sake and for the ones still alive,
still alive, yeah.
you have to somehow move on.
Move forward. Yeah. You have to,
so-
how do you move forward,
Yeah.
diba? How do you move forward? So it's always a choice.
Mhm.
And you always have the power to choose
What about
what to do.
yung isa sa gusto ko dito sa libro, yung confronting yung EJK, sharing about the EJK
Oh, yeah. That's
diba?
also
Experience.
a totally different. On dami ding naulila, 'di ba? Sa
Yeah,
EJK,
yeah,
and a lot
yeah.
of them are traumatic because they see the actual killing right before,
Yeah.
right before their eyes, right? Alam mo, I really kind of appreciated that more. Recently, I've had a client, a young girl. She actually saw her father's. Ito naman baliktad. The father was military.
Oh
So,
my. Mhm.
yeah. So shot, in broad daylight right in front of her. And it's really so hard for the children or for those who witness it. So kailangan niya ng tulong talaga ng psychiatrist who specializes in trauma. I mean, that's not my field of specialization. So
Mhm.
mahirap. It's violence is, especially if you witness it.
Mhm.
And then there's what they call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So it doesn't stop there. That particular experience of witnessing your parents being shot
Mhm.
has a lifelong impact usually on your health,
Wow.
physical health and mental health.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking about, my God, all these children, diba, who lost their parents violently, or all these children who lost parents during COVID. Like, ano ba yung statistics sa US? There's like how many hundreds of thousands of children who lost parents or caregivers because of the pandemic. So, ang impact nito, father, will extend, for many years. It's like 9/11, right? 9/11, this 20 years later, you can still see the impact on the lives left behind.
What if the one you lost, you never loved? what a, what a, what a question.
Oh,
Diba?
that's an interesting question. So you would think, hindi na siguro magmo-mourn yan kasi, di ba, parang relieved na siya ganyan. But no, I've seen it that parang mas komplikado pa. For some, mas komplikado pa kasi meron kang guilt, di ba? Na parang, yes, I'm happy that he's dead, but, there's this guilt that I feel that, or yung mga, because the person was so mean to them, throughout the marriage. Tapos, di naman sila naghiwalay, they stayed together and all that. Pag namatay, parang nagpa-flashback lahat yon. Isipin mong, bakit ko ba tiniis yun lahat? Or I didn't have the opportunity to tell him that this is how he made me feel, this is ganito and all that. So it kind of also complicates the grief. Yes.
May kaibigan ako she lost her dad 2 years ago.
Okay.
The problem, however, was yung dad niya matagal nang hiwalay sa kanila because he married another. Hindi married kumbaga sumama na sa kabit niya.
Partner, oo.
Ito naman kaibigan ko, medyo may pagka-spiritual. She was able to forgive the father na.
Okay.
And
yes.
She and her mom lived a quiet life and they were happy, etc. Pero namatay yung father.
Okay.
So, actually, yung ano nga doon, yung sila yung legal family. So, sila yung nag-wake. Pero parang sa pelikula. So, syempre yung kinakasama, kinailangan ding, so dalawa silang naglalamay.
Exactly.
So, pero siya, yung kaibigan ko, parang she was conflicted. Sabi niya, ano ba dapat nararamdaman ko? Kasi zero, wala siyang maramdaman.
Yeah, diba? So you feel guilty na wala kang nararamdaman, diba? Tama ba yun? Or ganito.
Kinokonsult siya ng lahat ng mga tao, pero siya naman parang, okay.
Okay lang, di ba?
Diba?
Okay lang, oo. So,
Pero,
iba-iba talaga. Tapos meron naman yung, kunyari, nabiyuda ka, pero was physically abusive to you, right? Or, was cheating on you or what? So, ano ba yun? Somehow, mixed din sila Parang, sige, kasi the marriage was long, palagay mo na 30 years, 40 years. Gandun yung galit. But at least at the same time, andun din yung naaalala nila yung good times, diba? So it's like scramble na. So,
But will it catch up with you later on?
no, that you gotta process it, diba? You
Okay.
just have to like be true and be honest with yourself that, and essentially it's always an issue of forgiveness,
Forgive me.
diba? Forgiveness talaga yan eh. Forgiveness talaga. I mean, I've had cases na madi-discover, meron palang
Yes.
family, meron palang, my gosh, di ba? Meron palang girlfriend all throughout the time that they were married and all that. So, what are you gonna do? Di ba? Are you gonna hold on to that
Yeah.
pain?
Mhm.
Yes. Binetray ka and all that, but you're still here.
Mhm.
I mean, right? What are you gonna do with the rest of your life? Hold on to that betrayal? Hindi na, di ba? Forgive mo na lang. Of course, easier said than done, but
Yeah.
so you have to help guide people too. I mean, you know that as a priest, I'm sure, di ba, na
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do you get them to a point of really forgiving?
Yeah. How big a factor is in the healing process? How big a factor is one's faith, one's spirituality?
Oh, I've seen that it really helps.
Mhm.
Parang mas maganda yung movement, mas maganda yung pag-usad when you you have a personal relationship or you have a strong faith life. But
Mhm.
you know that loss also can shake that
Yes. Yes.
faith life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Shake that faith life like to mega proportions.
Mhm. Mhm.
But then you realize that it's also only the Lord truly who can take you through that valley,
Mhm.
right? So I always get the question, but I'm mad at God and all that, and I don't feel like praying to Him. And I said, do you think God is mad also at you? No, God also understands, that you're human, you're breaking, you're just in this really dark space now, and He's just waiting for you to
Mhm.
return. Diba? Just don't stay there for an extended period of time.
But is it too soon if you kumbaga, rather than dealing with the sadness, the sorrow,
Mm-hmm.
pain,
Yeah.
may mga nagsasabi kasi na you spiritualize it already when you
Mm.
ay bahala na ang Diyos, etc., etc.
Mm-mm.
Is that short-circuiting the process? Kailangan
Um, each person goes at their own pace, diba? So sometimes I have clients who say, it's like, do you use God, when you like do your coaching and all that? So I just say, I use it when I talk about God when it's appropriate, when I feel that, it will help the person. But there are times when, lalo na sa una, di ba, when they're so angry and all that, I mean, they'll get more angry if you bring God into the equation, right?
yeah.
So I just let them rant and all that. It's not fair, whatever. Cha 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 cha. I've been a good Catholic or I've been a good Christian all my life, and why did God do this to me? And so, which why I'm saying you just have to let them let it all out. Because sometimes once it's all out, they just like need to say it and come to their own realization, whenever that may be. That it's really
I know you're a spiritual person, Cathy, but
yes.
what does grief teach us? Di ba?
Mm.
Merong tinuturo dito, ano?
Yes.
And that's why you have to go through it, di
Mhm.
ba? And that's why you have to face it. Para
Right.
sa'yo, you have experienced a personal loss, di ba?
Right.
Family members.
Mm-mm.
What does grief teach us?
Grief has taught me that everything is really temporary.
Mhm.
Everything is really temporary. You're not sure. The only thing that's guaranteed is this present moment, like this moment that you and I are talking. So it's taught me to be really, mindful, not have my head in like 10,000 places, especially when I'm with loved ones, with family members. Nandun ka talaga, 'di ba? Focused ka talaga. And death is something that we need to normalize, and talk about. So with grief, people will say, hey, wag na pag-usapan yan kasi ang lungkot naman, ganyan. Or baka i-attract natin kasi pinag-uusapan natin, which is all just, a myth, right? So I always tell people, especially after a certain age, especially with what COVID has taught us, you can go anytime. So you need to be ready. Diba? You need to be ready spiritually. You need to be practical and have your affairs in order, right? Talk to your children, talk to your family, so that when you go, the only thing, I always say this, when I go, the only thing I want my children to do is to mourn me. Ayoko nang may iba pa sila poproblemahin, iintindihin, ganyan, mag-aaway-away, whatever. No. So,
How do
leave them
you
with good memories.
how do you take care of yourself, Cathy? Because, di ba, when you're a counselor, when
Yes,
you're a coach, you
right.
absorb all of this, yung
Yeah.
galit, lungkot. You can absorb all of them. But how do you
Yes,
protect yourself? Yeah.
right. Well, it was easier pre-pandemic because, I just go down, I'll walk, I'll go to the mall, go stroll, go to the spa, get a massage. But man, the pandemic took away all of that, right? So I watch K-drama, I watch Netflix, I exercise, this YouTube, I discovered so many exercises on YouTube. Ganon. And then I really have times of quiet when, I just don't talk to anybody. It's just me. I meditate, I read the word, I pray a lot. So that really helps.
Parang ano, di ba, yung caring for the caregivers.
Yes, very important.
Mhm.
Very important. We're so good at showing self-compassion to everybody else except ourselves.
Yeah.
Except ourselves.
Ano yung mga projects ni Miss Cathy Babao? Now, especially now that we are, you hate the word, pero normalizing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was just mulling about this, and I'm just about to ask, in fact, for contributions. I'm working on a project. I'm looking for stories, love stories. Not necessarily romantic love, but there's all sorts of love. Love for if you're a doctor, love for your patients, diba? If you're a parent, love stories from the pandemic is what.
From the pandemic.
Yes, from the pandemic. Because, diba, it wasn't naman all that bad eh. I mean, there were gifts given to us during the pandemic that we would never have found or received if we had not gone through that period. So that's what I want to focus now on. So
it's a
ikaw
book?
lang yeah, it's a book.
It's a
You're the
book
first
project.
one to hear about this, Father Nono. So yeah, so I'm going to ask. I'm going to look for those stories.
Okay. And for this book, wala na tong, ang ganda ng libro, of course.
Yes, it's published by OMF. That's not my book,
Yeah.
Father. I
Yes,
only
I
put
know.
a forward. Yeah, but
Yeah.
props to OMF for
Yeah.
putting together this really great, this really wonderful book.
Yeah.
I hope many people get to read it,
Correct.
especially those who have experienced loss during this period.
Thank you so much. But before we let you go, Miss Cathy, siguro final message for those who have lost people they love during this pandemic.
Yes, and because the holidays are approaching, and the holidays are always the most, the most difficult part of the grief journey. I just, want you to remember that it's hard, but it won't always be hard. It will get better. The first year is always the most tough, but once you get over that hump, slowly it will. The first of everything. So the first Christmas without the loved one, the first New Year is tough. But once we get over that, things will kind of. But you have to do things. You can't also just sit and mope and mourn. Ano ba ang pwedeng gawin, diba? What are some of the things that you can do during this holiday season to remember to celebrate the life of the person, now gone? How would that person want you to celebrate Christmas, want you to remember them during this period?
And if they would like to, for example, avail of your
Yes.
service as coach,
They can just email me. It's cathybabao@gmail.com. And if you have stories that you want to share,
Yon.
cathybabao@gmail.com.
cathybabao@gmail.com.
Yes, Cathy with a C. Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Cathy.
you, Father. This was fun. This is good. Thank you for coming up with this hour where we can talk freely about grief and loss. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for saying that. Ingat.
Thanks, Father. Ingat din. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. So
Bye-bye.
that's Cathy Babao, mga katipuneros, and she's our grief educator and coach, cathybabao@gmail.com. May nagtatanong po ng title ng libro. The title of the book is This Season of Grief, an OMF literary collection. So stories, poetry, prayers, and practical help. Available po yan sa OMF Literature Incorporated. The foreword was written by Miss Cathy Babao. So sana po nakatulong sa atin ang ating programa ngayon, mga katipuneros, in this season of grief nga, no? And yun nga, malapit na po ang Pasko. So hopefully, slowly, gradually, we open ourselves to joy. The joy because the Lord is coming soon. Ayan. Okay, so maraming salamat po sa mga nanood. Maraming nanood sa atin. Thank you so much. Ayan, may nagtatanong na what's the minimum requirement for the love story submission. Usually po, short articles lang ang hinihingi nila. So I guess the usual, 1.5 single space. Yun yung sa mga dyaryo. So maraming salamat mga katipuneros. Hanggang sa Webes po. Sa Webes, we will talk about gratitude. And of course, we have our resident psychologist on board for that. Miss Lizzie Ann Puno will talk about gratitude, how to be grateful, especially in the US and in other Western countries. Malapit na ang Thanksgiving Day nila. Maraming salamat. Hanggang sa susunod na programa, therefore, mga katipuneros, this has been the Jesuit Hour. Have a happy lunch, everyone. Bye-bye.
The Jesuit Hour. Get to know the Jesuits. Discover their spirituality, their history, their ministries. The Jesuit Hour. Anything Jesuit, everything Jesuit. The Jesuit Hour. Radyo-katipunan. News, insights, inspiration. Radyo-katipunan. Down from the hill and down to the world. Radyo-katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle.
Radyo, 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 katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Radyo, radyo, katipunan. Radyo, katipunan. Voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay at tenista, sa loob sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida.